Hi, my name is Todd Satterston, and I want to thank the folks at BookNet Canada, in particular Neha, for inviting me tonight to talk to you guys about how book publishing and startup culture have this intersection that we should be paying a lot more attention to. For those of you who aren't familiar, I did a project with O'Reilly called Every Book is a Startup. And I call it a project because what's funny is when we bring the word book into that conversation, we have a very specific view of what a book is. We think of it as something that has pages, that they look like these things, sitting behind me on the shelf. They're written from start to finish. With the Every Book is a Startup project, what we did is we actually released it to start with as a 2-chapter ebook that we used as a minimum viable publishing product to go out and solicit feedback from a set of users to see was there interest in it, could we generate sales for it, what sort of things do people want to know about that are going on within publishing, and how those things might relate, how startups and publishing sort of go together. So in the end, we did about 8 chapters. We did 4 releases over the course of a year. The project was, I think it cost $1.99 when we started. When we were done, I think it was $9.99. And one of the unique things we did was, at whatever point you bought in, you got all the future updates for free. So, to no surprise, probably to any of you, we did most of our sales pretty early on when the price was very inexpensive. But even at $9.99, it isn't super cheap, or it isn't super expensive. But there's lots of things I talk about in that project that we could spend a lot of time on, but there's one in particular I want to make sure that I get across tonight. And I think the one that we have the biggest problem with, and I don't care if this is startups or if it's books, is that we have a really hard time assessing the felt need of a given audience. Is there anybody out there that wants what it is that we're doing? And I think by using, essentially, for you technology folks, a waterfall process in creating books, where we're going to kind of propose we write this book, spend a lot of time writing it, usually months, potentially years, and then introduce it to a marketplace where we really have absolutely no idea whether or not there's going to be any interest in it, either at the time that we proposed it or when it is and it's finally completed. And I think figuring out ways to assess felt need in as many points in the process as possible is really important. And what I want to do is I want to share a sort of a mini case study maybe with you about a project that I've been working on and the variety of ways that we've been trying to use data or do data-driven publishing in this little startup of a book that we're working on. So the book is The Phoenix Project, a novel about IT DevOps and helping the business win. It's a book that's put out by a set of authors here in the States. And for those of you on the tech side of things, it comes from the realm of trying to get dev to work better with ops. It's bringing lean manufacturing to IT. And what's interesting about the book is it's actually written in a novel format. So it's a fictional story about an IT operation and the troubles that they go through and how they figure out a better way to work with development and deploy applications and be successful. So what's interesting, the first thing we did on this particular project was we did some title testing, and we used Google Adwords. And so that's not super unusual. You've probably heard of other cases of people doing that. Tim Ferriss is known for it. There's another book that I'm pretty familiar with that a few years later, it was a book called Super Crunchers, where the author used Google Adwords as well. For us, we picked about 120 different keywords that we thought matched up against the kinds of readers who would be reading this book. The key thing that we did, though, which in hindsight was one of the smartest things we did, but I couldn't have told you that before we started, was we organized those keywords into a set of personas. And we just happened to name the personas for people actually in the book. So we had keywords for CEOs or CIOs, keywords for developers, for consultants, for head of operations, for people who are doing process kind of ITIL work. And the original working title for the book was actually called When IT Fails. And being a book publishing veteran, I just didn't feel like that was the right title for the book. And I expressed that a few times. But it was hard to go back to them and provide more information as to why isn't that a good title. I felt it wasn't aspirational enough, and there was a really kind of knocking IT when we wanted something that was going to be more aspirational and more showing what it is that's possible. So what was interesting, we did testing over about 3 days, spent maybe $600, $700, so not too much money, several 100,000 impressions, hundreds of clicks. And what was interesting is the title that we ended up going with for the book, The Phoenix Project, was the winner, but there was one group of people that the When IT Fails title did really well with, and that turns out it was the security folks. It was the CISOs, and it was the folks who were trying to protect the organization and who often think it's about failing to get people's attention. What's interesting is the lead author on the book comes from the security industry. And so what was wonderful about this particular test is I was able to show him, I totally understand why you love the title. Look, people from your industry absolutely love it. The trouble is everybody else wants something that's more aspirational. So we tested both the title and the subtitle, and both were, I can't tell you how fascinating it was for us to be able to get some indicator about what it was that was going to work with different audiences, and what we could expect as we built the next step of our marketing campaign. The next thing we did is we did a reader survey. And again, I can't say enough how important it is that publishers start to build direct connections with the readers of their books. Leaving that 100% to retail, I think, leaves them with a dearth of information as to what's going on with their titles. If all we're going to do is depend on BookScan to tell us how many copies were sold, or a distributor to kind of share back anecdotes of what's happening in the channels, I think we'd miss a huge opportunity. So in our case, we went out to a reader base, set of people who pre-ordered the books, as well as people who had signed up for an email newsletter. And we asked them kind of a branch survey. So depending on which way they answered a particular question, we would change the questions that we asked them. But it was essentially 4 questions. The first was, have you gotten a copy of the book? And it turns out 75% of the people that we went out to with this survey had already gotten a copy of the book, which we thought was amazing. The follow-up question to that was, okay, so if you've got a copy of the book, have you read it or are you reading it? And 94% of people who said they'd gotten a copy of the book were reading it, or had read it, which we thought was absolutely amazing. The third question after that, again, if I got 2 yeses, the third question I asked them was a question that some of you might be familiar with. It's based on some methodology by a guy named Fred Reichheld. He calls it the Net Promoter Score, and you ask people one question, and you say, what's the likelihood that you would recommend, in this case, the Phoenix Project, to a friend or colleague? And you ask them to answer that question on a scale from 0 to 10. Turns out 9s and 10s are promoters, 7s and 8s are neutrals, and 0 to 6 are detractors. In our case, 75% of the people who responded consider themselves a promoter, 20% were neutral, and 5% were detractors. So that was pretty amazing. We asked one more question depending on which one of those they ended up with. So for promoters, what we did is we asked them, how would you recommend this book to someone else? What was the actual language would you use? And what's amazing is we've got 220 responses from readers who consider themselves promoters, people who, when you say, gosh, have you read a good book lately, they're going to say, oh my gosh, you've got to read the Phoenix Project. We have 220 responses from them from the exact kind of language that they're going to use. So what was great about that for us was that we were able to find out what sort of is the fact that it's a novel a problem. How often are they using the word DevOps? Which is kind of the term that the whole novel is based around. And building the next set of messaging in terms of how we go out to our readers is extremely helpful. For the neutrals, we said, what would it take to be a 9 or 10? And it turns out the most common response was, I'm not done with the book yet, which I think is pretty amazing. So there's still a set of people who could be 9s or 10s. We could actually see that number be 80-85% promoters. The number one, and then for detractors, we said, what's one thing we could do better? And the number one reason for the neutrals and the detractors was it's a novel. They want actually something that has a little bit more meat to it. They want to know the how-to of it. And we're actually planning a second book to follow up the Phoenix Project to address a cookbook for what it is you could do with DevOps. amazing feedback from just going out to a set of readers and asking them, a simple, something they can probably answer in about 60 seconds and give you some amazing feedback on what's going on. But again, you have to have that direct connection. The last one I want to talk about is just free. And everybody has problems with free. I'm telling you, free is one of the most important things for the spread of any message. And in our case, we've used it 2 different ways. The first one is we did a free giveaway on Amazon with our Kindle version for 3 days. And over those 3 days, we managed to give away 20,000 copies of the book. That is almost 3 times what we've sold of the book at that time. So absolutely amazing. What's more important, and this is the most important part, since that giveaway, the sales of our ebook version of the Phoenix Project is up 75%. Absolutely incredible. So free is a good thing. The last thing I want to tell you is another example of free is we actually give away a very large excerpt from the book. The book's about 345 pages. We let people basically say, if you give us your address, we'll send you back an excerpt. And we give them 170 pages. We give them almost half of the book. We ran some data the other day that since the beginning of our launch of the book, we've had 1,500 people sort of go through that process, click through, download the book. And what's amazing is 38% of those people, after having read 170 pages, get through to that link at the end of the book, click through to go and buy the book. So free is an absolutely incredible way, I think, to get people engaged. So there's a couple of case studies using data in a startup kind of mentality to figure out where we should go next. I hope this was helpful. Feel free to reach out to me. It's easy to find me on Twitter. I'm at Todd Satterston, or I'm at toddsatterston.com. And it's actually toddsatterston@gmail.com if you want to reach out to me. Thanks again for having me, and I hope this was helpful.